Dear all, I would like to repeat our next day 7 Faculty of Architecture in-house faculty development program will be conducted on 24th Monday. For the phone-in session, we'll be having Architect Mukhambiga along with Architect Mona Priya to present us with A Journey to Center of Earth is Easy, followed by Architect Kumareshwari with her students for the afternoon session with the topic Landscape Architecture.
Development plan and the total area of the is
Our next 9th webinar session is going to start within few minutes, which will be taken over by Architect Mohana Priya. So I request all the participants to stay back.
Thank you, Architect Sona.
Thank you, ma'am. Welcome.
Hi, ma'am. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. So we'll wait for another 7 minutes.
Yeah. So how did the session go?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. It went well. We had a good number of participants today. So it was mainly for the students for designing the portfolio.
Okay. Which
and
year?
With our in-house faculties.
Which year?
All the years, ma'am. All the years together, especially the 4th years for the internship people.
Oh, okay. So you have not, finished your last semester, is it?
It's done. It's done. They are going for their next internship now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Can we start?
Yes, Mohanapriya.
Good evening and a warm welcome to all the participants. On behalf of Faculty of Architecture, Dr.MGR Educational Research Institute, Madurai, Chennai. Myself, Architect Mohanapriya, Assistant Professor, Faculty of Architecture, takes privilege in welcoming you all for our webinar series, session 9 today on topic Architecture Revisited. We have a speaker with us for today's session, Architect Rama Karthikeyan, who is an architect and a designer. I request our HOD ma'am, Professor Architect Radhika, to welcome our speaker of today's session. Just a minute, ma'am. I think some connectivity issues from our side. 1 minute.
Hello.
Ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Started, Amma?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hello. Good morning, dear friends. Good evening to all. I welcome Architect Rama, ma'am, for today's session. I think Architect Mona Priya would have given a nice, good introduction about her. So we are very much pleased to have her talk about the changes in architecture and enlighten us, the students as well as co-professionals on her presentation. We welcome you, ma'am. The stage is over to you.
Before we start, I would like to give a small brief about today's speaker. Architect Rama Karthikeyan, who is a senior architect with over 38 years of experience in the field of architecture. She completed a master's in architecture from School of Architecture and Planning, Chennai, with a gold medal, having graduated BArch from the same institute. She has a wide range of experience in architectural practice, having worked with private and government organizations and involved in her own practice, providing architectural and interior design solutions for commercial, residential, institutional, multi-use and recreational buildings with customized designs to suit individual requirements. She has more than 20 years of involvement in architectural pedagogy, currently Design Chair, School of Architecture, Hindustan Institute of Technology and Science. Today, she's here with us to share some of her experiences about few buildings and how they are connected. We welcome you, ma'am. I request you to take over the session.
Thank you, Mohana Priya. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start today by talking. Can I?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. The screen is visible.
Yeah. I'm going to start today's session by talking about the human mind. The human mind is phenomenal. It is a manifestation of our thought, perception, emotion, determination, memory, and imagination. And memory, it's such a beautiful thing. It helps in enriching our experience. So how is memory encoded? We get a whole lot of information. That information is received, it's processed, then it's combined and connected with all other information that we have. It is stored and then it is retrieved when necessary. It is this memory that makes our whole journey in architecture and in life generally very enjoyable. I'm just going to talk about how we experience buildings. Generally, you read about a building. Then you talk about it to someone. There are questions in your mind. If you're a teacher, you talk about the building to your students. Then you get a chance to visit the building. Sometimes you may even revisit the building. So you dialogue with the building and then you see the connections and new stories develop in your mind. You can connect with a whole lot of stuff that you already know of, and then with the new meaning, your inspiration starts. Today, I'm going to talk to you about some of the buildings that I have experienced and I visited, and I'm going to start my journey with a book and then a bench. This is a book that many of you may be familiar with, The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. So this was a book that was written as early as 1942. So when I first joined college, my seniors always used to tell us, now you've joined an architecture school, you must read this book because it gives you great insights. The first time I read the book, I didn't know what architecture was all about. So I don't think I understood the complexities of this story. By the way, the story is about an architect who believed in the integrity of his vision. Then some years later, after I graduated, I became an architect. I started designing buildings. I reread the book. So that time, a lot of things I didn't understand the first time made sense to me. I think I enjoyed the book much better when I read it the second time. And then the last time I read the book was when someone told that this is a book that is offered as a must read in management schools. So I was wondering, what are the management lessons anybody can get from this book? And that was when I read the book for the third time. So my takeoff on this book, as a fresher, as a student, believe in yourself. Your work should be your passion and architecture should be your passion. The second is never lose your vision, because this was an architect who succeeded because of the integrity of his visions. And then third, it's possible to seek values uncompromisingly. And this is probably the lesson for management people. So every time I read the book, this book offered me something to value. Then now I'm going to talk about a bench. When I say a bench, you will be imagining a bench which probably seats 3 or 4 people. It could be made of concrete, steel, plastic. It could be anything, or it could be a long bench like the one on top, which you find in one of the airports designed by Santiago Calatrava. But the bench that I'm going to talk about is something totally different. So this, I think, is a magical bench because it just goes around mystically, winding, and then everything about this bench was totally different from the hitherto notions of bench I had known. So probably I came across this bench in a book in my college days. So I was fascinated by it because of the colored mosaic, because of the way it went around, because everything about it was not straight, the curved backrest, the curved seating. And this also created opportunities for groups to sit together and talk without being disturbed by the neighboring group. But the first time when I saw the bench, I never thought that this was a bench that was above in the terrace, because normally you always imagine the bench to be in the lower level in a park. But this is a bench in the terrace, and this was done by Antonio Gaudi in Barcelona. So this is a bench in Park Güell. So this Park Güell started off as a garden city kind of a project where some 60 villas were supposed to be built in the garden setting, but it did not materialize. But now it's still open as a park. So this particular bench was in the terrace, supported by Doric columns. And Gaudi's structural forms always mimic those found in nature. So if you look at the picture on the right, you will find that the stones are all mimicking a tree. And he also created spaces for birds' nests because this is a park and he wanted all of nature to pervade in this particular park. So Gaudi structural principles and his obsession with nature are totally known. And then many of his buildings are some kind of a creature popping out when you least expect it. So the entrance to Park Güell, you find that there is this creature that greets you. And Gaudi is also known for his ceramic work, which is known as Trencaris. As you all know, Spain is famous for its ceramic work, and there are a lot of tile factories all around. So a lot of ceramic waste was available, and he made it an integral part of his design where a lot of mosaic work was used. And there is a lot of symbolism also in many of his designs, like in the ceiling design you can find. Then columns always mimic tree trunks, and there was the minimal material that was needed for a particular function because he believed that was how nature designed. So moving on to another building of Gaudi in Barcelona. So this is a house that is full of symbols and fantastic imagery. So you find, if you look at the building, it looks as though it came from some fairy tale and it was transported to Barcelona. So when the building was first revealed to the world, there was a lot of criticism about the building. People were not very appreciative. In fact, some of them nicknamed the building as the House of Bones, because they felt that the lower floors resembled a bone structure. Probably his inspiration was from bones, because he found that the skeletons could carry a lot of weight, but then they were very fragile, but they looked very fragile, but they're very strong. Probably that was his inspiration. There were also a lot of other stories about this particular building. But what I liked about this building was that this was something that was totally different. I felt it was like an art piece to be enjoyed. In art, you don't question a lot, because it is the artist's freedom and liberty that would govern that art piece. So likewise, this particular facade I felt was an artist's true creation, because there was so much of intricacy and there was so much of detailing, from the way the lower floors were dealt with, to the way the upper floors and the balconies were dealt with, to this cross, which is again a symbolic element, which you can find in many of his buildings, because it points to the 4 cardinal directions, and to the roof that is supposed to be shaped like a dragon. Remember, there was a dragon in Park Güell also. So here again, this is supposed to be the back of a dragon. So if you look at these pictures, you can see that where the similarity of the bone or whatever people felt it looked like came from. Then some people thought that these balconies looked like bird's nest. Some others thought that they were an inspiration from the Venetian Mars. So each person interpreted it the way they wanted. But this was a canvas with an indecipherable story, and each person or each individual can decipher it as per their imagination. But one of the theories was about this particular roof. So I told you this was supposed to be the back of a dragon. One theory was that there was a princess, and St. George the Saint tried to save the princess and kill the dragon. And this particular hole was the place where he put his sword. There is another theory that said this was not so. And then there is also some comparison about what this was meant to be, the center portion, because that was again an intricate work with a lot of colored disc and glass that was used. So there were supposed to be many inspirations. One was the marine theme, the other was water, and the third was that it is supposed to be like the Claude Monet's famous water lilies representing water. So when I chanced to see this particular painting of Claude Monet later on in a New York gallery, I was trying to imagine whether the colors of this particular painting matched the colors of this building. But then I think my memory failed me then, because I could not remember what exact shade that was. And incidentally, Claude Monet has painted as many as 250 paintings in this series, which are exhibited all over the world. And then going back to this roof, the tiles were shaded so beautifully that it started from a green, moved on to a blue, purple, pink, and red. So there was so much of textural variety, there was so much of color variety, making it a great piece of art. Then going into the interior, you find that whatever you could see on the exterior was also carried on to the interior very seamlessly. So you could hardly find any, I don't think I found a single straight door without a curve. All the doors were curved, all the windows were curved, and there was beautiful work, and everything worked to this date. Particularly, we were opening all the doors and we were opening all the windows to see if a hinge had failed somewhere, if the curve fitted in properly into the frame. But then everything worked seamlessly, and the winding, twisting, everything continued all through door frames, peepholes, moldings, screens, all over. And you can just see the stained glass work. That again has the circles, and you find the circular discs are also there on the exterior facade. There was so much of intensity of detail in all his works. See, one of the things that he did was, until then, whenever people spoke of interiors of villas, though the exterior was given a lot of attention, the interior were not supposed to be very brightly lit or something. Many of them were used to having dark interiors. But Gaudi was very particular that the interiors had to be lit properly, and he introduced this light well. Incidentally, this was not a new work that he did, this building. So this was an existing building which the client wanted to demolish and then construct a new one. But then when Gaudi examined the old building, he found that it was structurally stable, and there was a lot of things that he could do to modify it to suit the client's requirements. So he requested the client to allow him to retain the old building, and then he modified it. He modified almost everything. He made the interiors brighter. He introduced this light wells. And there was this particular image shows the tiles in the interior patio. There is a gradation in the tiles from a dark blue to a light blue to almost white when it reaches the ground level. And you can also see that the windows are smaller on the top, and then gradually becomes larger and larger. And another admirable thing about Gaudi's work is that he used a lot of ceramics, stained glass, wrought iron work, forging, carpentry, thereby giving a lot of opportunity for the craftsperson in all his work. And the chimney is the culmination of everything that you saw elsewhere in the house. There were 4 chimneys. Normally, you would imagine chimneys to be dingy, covered with soot, etc., etc. But then these were again works of art, and the terrace itself is absolutely fabulous, where you can glimpse and have a beautiful view of the city of Barcelona. So he was one person who was able to combine beauty and function together. So we move on to another of his buildings called CASA MILA. So this one also had a nickname, and it was called the Stone Quarry. Can you imagine why? Because for everyone, it appeared to be like a piece of stone transport or a piece of rock transported from somewhere. It had fluid shapes, and the building was a corner site, so it was a prominent location. He came out with a lot of new concepts for this particular building. For the first time, he introduced the garage in the basement, and the walls that you see are not non-load bearing walls, and a lot of metal also was used for the structural elements. And the grills that you see here are the grills made out of wrought iron scraps that he obtained from a cellar. So here again, there is a lot to this particular house in the interior. There is a beautiful staircase, and you have murals all over. And then there is so much of detailing. Almost all the furniture and the lighting was designed. I think everything was designed by the architect, because he wanted to ensure that everything had a particular theme or a flow to it, and everything was inspired by nature. So this particular terrace has been in everyone's talk for a very, very long time, and it is a must-stop destination for any tourist now. So this is something like an evocative landscape in the terrace. Normally, you would imagine the landscape to be of greenery, but here it was a landscape of a different kind. So you had every element here that you see are all elements of function. You have the staircase bells, which are the larger figures, and then you have these which are the chimneys or the ventilation ducts. So all these together formed a beautiful picture, and people could imagine themselves to be in various scenarios that they wanted to be in. And unlike the other building that we saw, that is CASA Batlo, here there was not much of ceramic work that was used. It was all, because the theme was like a stone, it was all the same monotone. But only one of the chimneys had this, was covered in bottles. This terrace itself is stepped. Like if you look at this image, this is an attic. So here again, he introduced a new concept where the attic served as a insulator. Spain is a country which is very cold during winter. So this attic area served as an insulator for maintaining the temperature, and only during the summer. He devised very detailed kind of openings, and he told the people when to open it and to let in the breeze, and when to close it so that the heat can be retained inside. So there are so many theories, there are so many interpretations of this particular terrace. People have told a lot of things. It is very striking that no two chimney is the same, or no two staircase headroom is the same. So this is a functional element. You can see a door here. So this is a staircase headroom. So none of them is similar. Everything had some kind of a difference in it. So this is covered in China mosaic. This one is not covered in China mosaic. And then the terrace is stepped. You can sit on it and you can enjoy the view. And there are always beautiful openings that open on to the outside, where you can catch glimpses. In fact, through one of the openings, you can catch a glimpse of Sagrada Familia, one of the iconic buildings that he designed. So what has this been likened to? Someone said it's like warriors on a war front. And someone said it is like women with a veil. And someone else said it is like pawns. Somebody else said something else. But then George Lucas, the director of Star Warriors, was inspired by this, and that was how he adopted these in his in the image of his soldiers. And then some people said this looks like a mushroom. So it was left to the imagination of everyone to perceive this space as they wanted it to be. So when I went there, I felt I was like on a giant chessboard where there were all these kings and queens and soldiers marching on, and I have to defend myself. So Gaudi had put in a lot of thoughts towards this building, and he had worked every detail to perfection. But there was a lot of criticism about this building because people were not used to seeing such a building until then. So there were various cartoons that appeared in all the magazines, someone showing all these airships knocking off this building, another showing all these creatures growing out of the balcony, and the third showing skulls as these chimneys. So all this criticism he faced, but then he stood by his values and the integrity of his vision. And then taking a small break and moving on to Sri Lanka, this was a staircase detail I saw in the Lighthouse Hotel, GALLE, Sri Lanka. This is by architect Jeffrey Bawa. And Jeffrey Bawa also was a person who used a lot of art and craft in most of his works. And there was a close association with Laki Senayake, the sculptor, who came out with this particular piece. So here again, this depicts the Sinhalese warriors fighting against the Portuguese. So I could see similarities, though the form itself was totally different. Here again, base wrought iron was used. Here it was a sculpture. So this entrance area with this staircase and a skylight is breathtaking, and it is something that you have to go there and see it, to imagine it. We cannot leave Barcelona without seeing this particular building. This is the Sagrada Familia. It's almost been in construction for about 130 years. And this is what Gaudi has to say. Do you want to know where I found my model? An upright tree. It bears its branches, and these in turn the leaves. And every individual part has been growing harmoniously, magnificently, ever since God, the artist, created it. So trees have been an inspiration for many of us in many ways. So in a lot of construction sites, I've changed the windows, either made it bigger or changed the location so that you can have a glimpse of a tree outside or catch a particular flowering tree. So for him, it was an inspiration in terms of the structure, because he found that the branches, the way the tree branch and the flowers grow, everything was very harmonious and organic in nature. And that was what he wanted to adopt in his buildings. There were two things that were dear to him. One was nature, the other was God. So this particular building is a manifestation of everything that he believed in. And he had detailed out everything. His structural concepts are very strong. And in most of his buildings, you'll find the model that he had made to try out a particular concept. And because of his belief and because of his strength in structural concepts, he could carry out and execute a lot of things. So when completed, this is going to be the tallest religious building in Europe. So there are so many things to talk about this building, but we can go on and on and on. So I just want to stop here and then move on to another building, which is also inspired by a tree. Okay, so all of you know which building this is. This is the Johnson Wax building by Frank Lloyd Wright. So here again, he came out with a column that was only 9 inches in diameter at the bottom, and it widened up to 18 feet. So the building codes did not permit such a slender column. So, but he was very convinced that what he believed in is right, and this particular column can bear the weight. So they wanted to test it with whatever was the load permissible, that's 12 tons. But then he made them 12 tons, it did not fail. So he made them load it up to 5 times the weight it was supposed to carry, and it still held. And only after it was loaded 5 times the weight, it just collapsed. So he was again someone who believed and who had very good structural strengths and knowledge of the structure, that he could carry out his vision to its fulfillment. So trees, I told you, are always been a fascination for me. And this was a poem I had penned sometime. Trees are a marvelous spectacle, diversity in creativity. Like trees diverse, we fashion inspired spaces, innovative forms unfolding. We move on to a completely different thing. But before we move on to this, I just want to take a pause and tell the students and the young architects. So I was talking about how Gaudi always used a lot of crafts and arts in his buildings, and how Jeffrey Bawa also did that. So now I find that there is a renewed interest in art, architecture, heritage, but there are a lot of crafts people in India. We have such a wide culture, such rich architecture, such rich heritage in terms of the crafts. But unfortunately, we have not failed to make use of it in our buildings. And it is really necessary for us to do this consciously and mindfully, so that we promote all these people, and these arts do not become dying arts or dead arts, but we need to revive all these arts and crafts so that we keep the tradition alive for our future generations. I want to leave this message for all the students and the budding architects. So we move on to another totally different genre. So in any story, the setting becomes very, very important. because it allows the readers to visualize the characters in the story better. And the setting also influences you to think of, to put yourself in their shoes. And you also know how the particular character will react and respond because of the setting. So just like that, it is very, very important for us to think of the setting of our architecture. So great setting enhances great architecture. So if you look at this particular building, which all of you are familiar with, the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, 1997 it was constructed, so it's more than 20 years old now. So this was set along the edge of the Nervion River on the one side. So this was part of a revitalization project of Bilbao. So when this museum became famous, this whole thing was called as the Bilbao effect, where setting up of a cultural facility can help revive a particular city. So this was one building where critics, academicians, fellow architects, everybody had nothing but praise for this particular building, because this was a totally different sculptural quality that he could bring about, Franco Gehry could bring about in this particular building. So when I visited the building, I happened to walk to the building, and I walked across this particular portion of the river. So I could admire the building from the other side in all its glory, and I could leisurely walk, pause, look at it from every angle. So I had my full fill of the exterior of the building before I went in. So arriving at this particular place and viewing it from across the river, and the way it captured my mind is something that I cannot tell, because I did not expect to be overwhelmed by the view, but I was. Then this is a typical example of architecture as culture. So here again, some people say that from the top it looks like a flower, but you find that it actually looks like a ship, probably because this was a port area and this building was built as a revitalization exercise for this particular city. So another thing that I particularly connected with this was, you remember the scales in the building of Gaudi that in CASA Patlo. So there was a textural quality, and the colors sort of helped highlight in it. Here it was a monotone, but still because of the curvature and the sun glistening and falling on it, it could bring about some kind of an effect like that, where I could probably relate to the scales of the preacher in Gaudi's building. The interior is totally different from the exterior, where you have a lot of skylight and light floods in, making it very, very light. So I won't go into too much of details about the building. So this building had a lot of exhibits on the outside. There was a sculpture called Tall Tree by Anish Kapoor. And then if you look at this flower puppy, so that is the main entrance of this particular building, where you have an old building that's painted in blue that you can see on the right. And probably if I had experienced the building from this side, my views of the building might have been a little different, because this is not the perfect setting that I saw it from. So I think first impression is the best impression, and to this date, it's one of the buildings I remember the most. So talking of these three sculptures, there was one sculpture that struck me a lot. It was a structure of a spider. So when this was revealed, There were some people who were very amused and some who were astonished. So this was by a female sculptor who called it Maman, meaning a mother, because she felt that the spider was like a mother, or her mother was like a spider, because the spider is very industrious and hardworking. Her mother also was very, very hardworking, and she had worked in the tapestry workshop of her father, and she had passed away. So she dedicated this to her mother. So what I liked particularly about this sculpture was that it was slender, it's strong, and it's sort of just like the building was in harmony with the river setting, this sculpture was in harmony with the building, both contrasting and complementing each other. One a solid mass, another a slender mass, but where through which you can see the building as well as the sky. There is this bridge by Santiago Calatrava close to it. So I can talk about Santiago Calatrava's bridges or his work endlessly, because he's also one favorite architect of mine. But there was something that went wrong with this particular bridge, though everybody admired the way it was designed and how the fluid forms merged with everything else. There was a particular problem because he had used glass blocks for the floor. And then it became very slippery and a lot of people were falling. So finally he had to, they had to come out with a compromise, and they put a carpet for people to walk on. So sometimes there are pitfalls in using some materials which we need to think of. We were talking about beautiful settings, and who can but not remember Falling Water for its beautiful setting. So when you talk of a masterpiece is synonymous with timelessness. And the important thing is its significance still holds true. So this has been touted as a building which is one of the best for the last 125 years. It has been voted by the American Institute of Architects. So all of us are familiar with that. So again, talking about the arrival, you never see the building here. You always, there is a visitor center. So the first thing that you see is the visitor center, and then you go take a path, and then slowly the building is revealed to you. And then the entrance to this building itself is very insignificant. The interiors were something that I read about, with low ceilings, but always directing your view to the outside. But what I would say about this building is that it is dynamic and it integrates with the natural surroundings. So a building can merge with the natural surroundings. Okay, you cannot feel, you don't need to feel the building. But this building was dynamic in the sense that you could appreciate the architecture, you could appreciate the cantilevers, where you can appreciate the horizontal and the vertical, but then there was total harmony with the surroundings. And that was something great to achieve, and it's very, very difficult to achieve. The whole thing, I always quote this as an example of thinking out of the box. Instead of putting the building in front of the fall, right, chose to put it on top of the fall. And he had a lot of convincing to do with his client, because no client could imagine how the building would fit in. But now the waterfall became an integral part of the house. You can't take it out of the house. It just merges so seamlessly. And I think that has been the greatest achievement by Frank Lloyd Wright. And that is why it is a timeless building. So glass always leading your sight outside. So here again, he was very particular about the colors that he used, and he wanted all the windows to be painted Cherokee red, and there was always a link with the outside in the stone floors, polished in the inside, but left rough on the outside. And everything worked again. Beautifully placed windows where you can peep out and then feel to be a part of the exterior. And then the elusive view. This is the view that we always see, but this is not the view that you see till you go to the building. You have to come out of it and then walk a little bit, and that is where you see this building. Here, I just want to briefly touch upon the Roby House in Chicago and the Taliesin West in Arizona. So both were buildings that fitted their particular setting, and both sort of were always like they belonged. You know, you can't take the setting out of the building, and I don't think it would fit anywhere else. And both the three buildings are totally different in context. One is a prairie style of a house, the other is in a wooded area, the third is in the Arizona desert, but everything fitted into the setting particularly well and then very seamlessly, and that is the biggest achievement that an architect can get. So moving on to a totally different thing. So we were talking about the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, and this is the Guggenheim in New York. So when you're talking about the point of arrival and this setting and all that, no, this was a very tight corner. So you get off the taxi, you're into the building. But this building again was, I mean, I was overwhelmed by this building because there has been a lot of criticism about this building ever since it was built, because people felt that when you talk of a museum, it has to have galleries. You cannot have a ramp as a gallery space and this whole large space. So it was totally the antithesis of everything that people had known until then. But I felt that this was the USP or the strong point of this particular building, because you can experience the curvilinear forms. And unlike other galleries, because I visited a lot of galleries in Madrid and whole of Spain, there are a lot of museums, and New York and US also, there are a lot of museums. But everywhere you'll find that the galleries are separate. You just have a central space from which you move on to any gallery. But here you felt that you were a part of the whole crowd that was milling around. And I felt that this was a great building. So anywhere you are, you know, when you're looking at any of the paintings, you can always go near the parapet and then look down to see how to experience what everything else about the building. You can also look at the skylight. You can look at the lobby and the bench and the people milling around. There was controversy about this building also, because people felt that in the inclined wall, you cannot hang a painting straight, but then somewhere some compromise was made. So when I was there, I was talking about an exhibit outside in the Guggenheim Bilbao. So here, as we were walking, there was a long queue outside one space. So probably I thought that was some painting which everybody was taking a long time to see, but then it was the restroom. So I was just wondering why there is such a long queue for the restroom. It was a rainy day, but still that seemed to be too long a queue to access that restroom. Then I found that there was a particular exhibit in this restroom. So this is Maurizio Catalana's 18-karat gold-plated water closet, which had plumbing and everything that worked. So this was installed and people could actually use the toilet and experience this piece of art. And incidentally, this was called America. It was a spoof. And then I was talking about the appearances. In order to catch a glimpse of this particular building, you have to walk to the other side of the road, and then you see all these intrusions that also occupy your frame. So the dialogue between the Bilbao Guggenheim and the Bilbao at New York, I mean, Guggenheim at Bilbao and Guggenheim at New York. So they're totally different in terms of the form, in terms of the siting, in terms of the arrival and the space inside, and in terms of the material, but both were iconic buildings in their own accord. And this was actually what Frank Lloyd Wright had originally planned for this building. He wanted it painted a shade of red. So then just moving on to another example of architecture as art, but I'm not going to go inside this particular building, the Art and Science Museum in Singapore, which is again another iconic building. But the two times that I saw an exhibition there, one was a Lego exhibition, which offered immense possibilities for architectural models. And the second was the work of M.C. Escher, whom I admire. His his drawings are sort of very, very complex, and you can just look at a painting for hours together and to try and figure out what it is all about. So we've covered a lot of things. There are a lot of things that there is art, there is architect, there is building, the places, the connections, and there are timeless concepts and hidden meanings. It is for each of us to find these connections and these meanings. As particularly for students, I would like to tell, start developing, start mindfully thinking about these connections and try to get the meaning from everything, whether it is your theory subjects or whether it's your design or whether it's your building that you see on the road, whether it's a building you read about. You need to understand, observe, and find out what the connections between them are. Then that will enrich your experience. To move on to something which always interests me, that is the urban spaces. What makes a public place great? And when do we tell stories about a place? So this is a very famous choir, St.MARKS Choir, Venice. This is something that has something for everyone. So if you are an architect, you can look at the buildings. If you are religious, you can visit St. Mark's Basilica. Then you can take a romantic ride in the gondola, and you can visit a glass factory and see how glass is manufactured. You can buy masks, and you can stand in front of the Bridge of Sighs and then wonder what stories those prisoners will be thinking of as they moved across. And coming back to our own urban space, so once when I was sitting in the Marina Beach and somebody was selling masks of animals, I was thinking why they cannot sell masks for older people just like they do in Venice. And that set me thinking, what is it that we don't have about this great urban place? We have the sun, the sea, and the sand. And this is something that has something for everyone again. So if you want to play cricket, you can play cricket. If you want to take a walk, you take a walk. You want to take a horse ride, you can just chat with your friends. You can eat, whatever. But how is this place transformed? I don't see any development here or any positive growth other than the mushrooming of the shops. Why is it that we can't do something about it? Can we make it much more enjoyable, and how do we do it? As an example, I would like to quote the Millennium Park, Chicago. So here again, it's a great urban space. You have a lovely, again, something like a serpentine bridge, which was designed by Franco Gehry, and the J. Pritzker Pavilion done by Franco Gehry. Again, his trademark stainless steel was there. And then there is this beautiful piece of sculpture called Cloud Gate by Anish Kapoor. This is dubbed as the bean by many people because it resembles the shape of a bean. So this particular Millennium Park has been very popular with the locals as well as the tourists because there are a lot of interactive things. This, if you look at the Cloud Gate itself, it reflects the sky, and if you stand under the arch, it reflects you. So it is a very interactive piece of sculpture, and not a sculpture which you stand far away and admire. And this is made of stainless steel. The inspiration was mercury. But just imagine for the stainless steel to be shaped like this, and for you not to see a single joint, how much of effort, how much of planning And for the structure to stand, how much of thought has gone into the whole process, and how much of ingenuity and then structural concepts have been incorporated in this particular sculpture. That is what we all need to think about. And then one more thing is the crown fountain. So here again, it is a fountain that is interactive. So you have this granite at the bottom and there is water. So people can always go dip their feet. And this is actually a tower with an LED screen. So you have water spouting out of the person's mouth at regular intervals. Just imagine the plumbing has to work, the LED screen has to work, and it all has to be seamless. You shouldn't be seeing any of the service lines anywhere. And this actually has been very, very popular. And this whole park, because it is based on the universal design and accessible for everyone, it is enjoyed by everybody. So we need to work on creating such great urban spaces in our cities as we work towards creating great architecture also. So I would have liked to cover Santiago Calatrava's building because like I told you, I like his buildings very much, but then due to paucity of time, I think I will finish now. It has been wonderful sharing all these with you and going back and revisiting these great places. Thank you very much. And thank you, MGR University, for having given me this opportunity to be with all these people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us a wonderful talk and an interesting presentation for all of us, sharing your own personal experiences and travel journey on few buildings from city of Barcelona, Sri Lanka, Chicago, New York, taking us back to the designs, facades, interior detailings, materials, and the works that inspired you from different architects like Frank Lloyd, Franco Gay, Geoffrey Bawa, Antoni Gaudí, and how it gets connected and their association behind it. All the pictures which you had showed us were so beautiful, touching us upon art and architecture, sculpture, and it was like a storytelling behind each picture, especially the urban public spaces. It is definitely an inspiring talk for all the passionate travelers. It gives a good treat to the eyes through the lovely travel pictures during this lockdown period. I'm sure this presentation will definitely inspire all bridging their individual travel experience to learning. Now I request all the participants to post down the questions in the chat box. We can discuss here. We have 2 questions now. Can I proceed with the questions now? Can I read out the question, ma'am?
Yeah, please.
Do we have to look into interpretation of different people, or do we look into Gaudi's idea? Isn't people who admire his work or him being more artistic? What is your opinion about it?
I didn't catch the question. Can you just repeat once again? Yeah,
I'll repeat again. Do we have to look into interpretation of different people, or do we look into Gaudi's idea? Isn't people who admire his work or him being more artistic? What is your opinion?
The last part I'm not able to hear. Whose question is that?
Isn't people who admire his work or him being more artistic?
You can't take the man's work out of him. Okay, it is not him they admire, it is his work they admire. See, there are different interpretations. Like now, if you look at, I was talking about Santiago Calatrava. If you look at his work now, there are a lot of sketches to back his concepts. So his concept is revealed to everyone. So you can see that what did he think of when he designed a particular building, or what inspired him, which skeleton inspired him, or which human form or bird inspired him. So his sketches tell all. So that is why we are all always telling our students to sketch. But then, see, the interpretation makes this journey interesting, because if you know that he designed it based on this, you can only imagine it to be that. Okay, but when you do not know, or when you do not have any clue, then you can always let your imagination run wild, think whatever you want. That is like looking at the clouds. Each person can think what they want about the clouds, no? And what shape they represent. So it is like that. Incidentally, I forgot to mention this. Salvador Dali, the surrealist architect, was a great fan of Gaudi. So he promoted a lot of Gaudi's work, and then he wrote a lot, so that also, a lot of things have gone into making Gaudi's work acceptable, because during his time, there was a lot of criticism. Now they promote Barcelona as Gaudi's Barcelona. And then a lot of his buildings are UNESCO heritage sites. So I think the only lesson that it gives us all is believe in what you're doing. Someday you will reach where you want to be.
Okay, I'll go to the next question, ma'am. Setting plays, you were talking about the setting. The setting plays a very vital role in making the building an exemplary one, be it falling water or any historical monuments. It has a strong say. Then should there be a study to be included in selecting and segregating a potential site with a strong setting that can contribute a good example? If yes, according to you, where can this study be included, or who is responsible for identifying the ideal setting?
See, in today's scenario, like for example, if you want to construct a building, more often than not, someone has already identified the site and they come to you. So in places like Singapore, a lot of land is being reclaimed from the sea. So there, if it is going to be a reclamation exercise, you can choose where you want to be and see about the feasibility. But otherwise, often the setting is given to you. Here, when we talk about settings, see, we have beautiful architecture, our temples, we have so many UNESCO heritage sites. But then the setting or the approach to the building itself is very often than not marred by shops and all kinds of structures in front. So if an architect has a say about a setting, then he can help the client choose the site. But otherwise, you have to work around what is given to you. Not everybody is given a great site.
Okay.
Because a site like falling water and all that, I think most of us may not get a chance to get such idyllic setting.
Okay. I'll move on to the next question. When do you think an architect makes a history? Is it when he or she is different from others?
Yes, I think. Because if you're doing what others are doing, then what is it that gives you the uniqueness? Like I told you, when Bilbao museum was built, that was hitherto unknown, a form hitherto unknown. So that is why it became a hit. And such architects who come out with buildings like that are called now star architects. So if you are different, yes, it catches the attention, but you have to also make your building functional and workable. It works. So you cannot create a building that looks different alone. You have to create a building that is totally different, and you have to work towards making it a perfect building.
Okay. Yeah. Next question. What is the experience of travel in architecture, and how does this impact on urban planning?
Traveling, yeah, urban planning, yes. See, when you go visit other places, you see how things work. You cannot transport what is happening, say, in Europe to India exactly as it is. There was a proposal sometime back. It's a little controversial. See, there is a place called Ar.Rama, one street in Barcelona. So something similar to that was planned in Lush Church Road, but it didn't take off. One, we need to think of the climate. Europe, during summer, summer for them is very, very less time. And for most of the year, it is either cold or it is pleasant. So they can think of urban spaces, and people can just sit outside and drink coffee in a cafeteria or whatever. So the streets become alive. But just imagine, in the hot sun, can we be sitting outside and enjoying a plaza? So if we make our urban plazas just open spaces devoid of any kind of a shade, would it work for us? So you can take a lot of inspiration, a lot of lessons from your travel, but then you try to modify it to suit our culture. What works for us, you have to base it on that.
Okay. There's another question from the participants. Why do you think the reason behind the 130 years of construction of the cathedral and almost 70% of work was done when Gaudi was alive still, we couldn't finish the building? Is it because of Gaudi's absence?
No, the building is, you can just, there are so many websites about this particular building. There are so many YouTube videos. There is so much of detailing everywhere. You know, it takes tremendous effort to go in with so much of detailing. And Gaudi had actually prepared structural models to see whether it would work. And, you know, those models are still there somewhere in display. So I think that much of detailing and funding again is a problem. It's an expensive proposition to go in with so much of art and craft and, you know, from the stained glass windows to every other detail. And no facade is again the same. The sculptures you find in one facade are different from this sculpture you find in another facade. So I think all this is taking time, and I think funding is one of the reasons.
Okay. Is there any other questions from the participant side? You can post down here in the chat box. Okay, I think there's no more new questions from the participant side,
Yeah.
ma'am. Once again, I would like to thank you so much for having a wonderful interactive session after your beautiful presentation and pictures. I'm also so privileged to host the session for you, ma'am, being my own faculty during my BR at SRM University. It was so nice to listen to your talk and your presentation after long years. Thank you for sparing your time in your busy schedule, even during this pandemic period, ma'am. On behalf of Faculty of Architecture, I would also like to thank all the participants for your cooperation and your valuable time and being so patient during the session. Looking forward to reconnect back with you all for the next upcoming sessions. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mohan and Priya. Thank you, everyone. I just read the